Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the weekly Sadakayon program organized by Quantum Meditation Society London. I am sorry about the delay today. I had some technical problems, which, with the help of our members here at Quantum Meditation Society London, I have been able to solve. So, thank you for that. Today, thank you for your patience. Thank you for waiting. Today, we are talking about overthinking. I'm sure that either you or somebody else that you know have experienced the state where you want to solve a problem or you want to improve a situation, and you find yourself just thinking about it. You just think, and when you think, it feels like, if I just think some more, I will be able to improve my situation. But it leads to nowhere. It At the end of all that thinking doesn't make you feel better. It makes you feel stuck. It makes you feel burdened. It makes you feel less confident. And it, rather than giving you a sense of making progress, it drains you. That is overthinking. And it is not just something that is uncomfortable, it is actually also a major risk factor for mental illnesses like anxiety disorder and depression. And today we are talking about how you or someone you know can not easily but surely step away from this habit of overthinking that their brains have nervous systems have developed, and go towards stillness and peace. Now, for a lot of people who overthink, the first step towards stepping out of that is realizing that thinking is not the solution to everything. Because thinking is useful, we tend to think all types of thinking is useful. We work from that assumption. What do I mean by thinking being useful? So, I have said this many times before that our brains and our nervous systems have developed to keep us safe. And the way it keeps us safe is by analyzing everything that has happened to us so far, giving them particular meanings, and based on that analysis, predicting the future. It's like a forecasting machine. It's continuously doing simulation exercises, imagining various scenarios to anticipate what might happen so that it can prepare the body to take action to primarily keep us safe in those situations, right? So obviously, this is something very useful. Just a simple explanation: you go to gather fruit through a path every day. One day, when you're going through that path, a snake comes, a cobra comes and tries to bite you. So then you escape somehow, but then your brain is analyzing that incident now, giving that meaning that, oh, this path is not very safe, but I still need to get my fruit. What am I going to do? What if I don't go? What am I going to will I be able to eat? If I do, which way is safer? Okay, if I have, this is the only way I have to go. What do I need to do to keep myself safe? And so on and so forth, right? So it is something analyzing the past, learning lessons from the past, and making forecasts based on that is something that is very useful that the brain has learned to do. Because it is rooted in this usefulness, we subconsciously, if we don't know better, assume that all types of thinking is good. Think, if I just think some more, if I only think a little bit more, I can make the best decision. If I think and think, maybe I won't be afraid of that thing anymore. If I think and think, maybe I can prevent anyone being upset with me ever. If I think and think, maybe I can be happy all the time. And so we work from this assumption, subconscious assumption, that thinking is useful, always useful. All types of thinking is useful. So when, unless we know better, we go down this road of thinking and thinking and thinking. And then on top of that, of course, our civilization have often glorified thinking, right? And thinking is, don't get me wrong, is a very, very useful tool. But like all tools, you have to use it in a useful way. And it is by no means the only tool in your tool case. It is only thinking is not going to give you a happy, complete life. So the first step towards breaking this habit of overthinking is accepting the fact that thinking will not always lead me to a solution. Let me just give you one tiny example. Say you're afraid of bees. What do you need to do to break this fear of bees? If you just think like, oh, bees are not really scary. Bees are, uh, they help, and bees are such amazing examples of teamwork, and they make this amazing thing called honey that is so useful for us. What do you think? The next time you go and sit on a park bench and a bee kind of buzzes close to you, do you think that will get rid of fear? No, that's not what helps us get rid of our phobia or our fear of something. What, in this case, what helps us is being in situations where the brain realizes that it made an error in its prediction that bees are always dangerous, exposing yourself to a situation where you are around a bee in a way that's not overwhelming for you. Don't put on like a costume and goes to someone's beehive. That's too much in the beginning. But in slow doses, giving your brain experiences that makes it realize that there was some error in its analysis and the prediction it made based on that analysis. So it's like if you can sit through the bee buzzing around you one day and it flies off, that's like a low dose of like giving your brain this message like, oh, it made some error. So now it can begin to update its program. So here's an example of where the thinking is, with just thinking something, you can't solve a solution. So I can give you many, 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 many situations like this where thinking can help. Like if you're an athlete and you just think, you are a swimmer, you just think, and you're never in the water. Will it help? No, it will not help. So thinking has its place. It's a very powerful tool, but like all tools, it needs to be used in the proper way. And when it's not used in an empowering way, like all tools, it can harm rather than help. And I say that again because even me, when I go back to my teenage years, I didn't know this. I was spent long time thinking and thinking, working from this assumption that if I just think and think a little bit more, I can solve the situation. So when you are beginning to accept, right, okay, not all thinking is helpful for me, the logical next step, of course, is to understand what kind of thinking are most harmful and try to limit those. Okay. So when we're talking about overthinking, we usually mean a few different things. One is what's called rumination, right? Like, cows ruminate, right? So you're chewing and chewing and chewing something that you've already digested. So you're going back and thinking and thinking and thinking about something in the past, then making prediction based on that, what will happen, and you're going in loops and loops and loops without ever getting to a decision or a solution. So, so obviously, this kind of circular thinking gets us nowhere. Another type of overthinking is worrying, and especially like in case of ruminating, thinking in what ifs, and in case of worrying about the future, thinking of worst case scenarios, right? A lot of us, like, we think, what if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens? We want to, like, protect ourselves from all worst case scenarios. I mean, that's the assumption the brain is working from, right? So this psychologists call this catastrophizing, because you're always imagining catastrophes, and again is a useless form of thinking. If you're going to take a flight, right, can you really, really, really think yourself into, like, protecting yourself from every kind of danger that is related to flights, even though flights are actually one of the safest modes of transportation? But if you look at, like, oh, there is a 0.0001% possibility of this, and there is a da 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 of this, and da 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 percent of tiny percent of this, even if you're thinking very logically, do you have so much control in your life that you can protect yourself from that? No. So it just taking your energy, taking your time, putting yourself in a low mood and keeping you stuck. Another way we overthink is like when we're making decisions. I mean, maybe you're going to buy a pair of shoes, and you are thinking and thinking and thinking again whether a certain pair of shoes is the right pair of shoes to buy in this case. Well, like, you're getting all the information you want. You are thinking like what if, like, there's a sale somewhere that will give you that in even lower prices. uh, you just never seem to have enough information to actually make the decision. And this called analysis paralysis, right? Like, we have committees and commissions in countries that never can get to a recommendation because they're like in analysis paralysis. Like, they're just analyzing, analyzing, analyzing without ever making a decision. Buying a pair of shoes is a subjective decision. You have to make that decision based on whether subjectively it is worth it for you to invest the time and the energy and whatever to that the people are asking for to get that shoe. You can't. Objectively, it's very different to do. You can't. It can't. You might love a pair of shoes, and somebody might come and say, like, what? You paid this much for this pair of shoes? Are you crazy? Like, what can you do? but it still may be worth that to you, which which takes me to something else that we overthink about is about social situations, right? Again, comes from a useful root. We are mammals, we exist in societies. We do not want to be outcasts because it's very difficult for us to survive. But then overthinking takes it to extremes where you are analyzing. Maybe you went to the office or you went to a social gathering. After you come back from the social gathering, you are analyzing every single thing you said and did, and thinking whether what other people thought of you based on that. Like, was so and so offended that I said this? Was so and so, does so and so think I'm dumb? Does so and so think I have bad taste? And so you're again, like you were thinking in rounds and rounds, and where is that thinking taking you? Can you ever guarantee that everyone will like you? Is that something that is really under your control, or is it something that depends on other people? You might be mm, a saint, and there are saints in this world. There are people in this world where large portions of people think are exemplary human beings, but other people hate. You know, some people believe this person is the epitome of how human beings could be in terms of greatness. And other people hate that person. Other people think that person, they have all sorts of labels for that person. So again, this is something that is never going to lead you anywhere, right? So we talked about rumination, we talked about catastrophizing, we talked about overanalyzing, making decisions. We talked about social anxiety, thinking about what other people think, and then a lot of overthinking. And this applied to me when in the past I was overthinking. Maybe in my teenage years, I was lying in my bed and thinking and thinking and thinking. A lot of that is just vague thinking. It is what is vague thinking? Over generalized thinking. So, like, why doesn't my friends like me? Where does thoughts like that lead me? Like, which friend? Are you sure that all of your friends don't like you? Then why are you even calling them your friends? Or why am I not happy? Or why don't I like anything? And I'm kind of laughing at myself, but like I represent a type, and again, I shouldn't laugh at myself, shouldn't judge it, but that a lot of us also do that. Like, once I started meditating and started becoming more and more aware of my thought patterns, at first we were looking at negative thinking and thinking that is disempowering. But as I went deeper and deeper, I also realized a lot of the thoughts are just very random and useless and not really taking me anywhere, but is affecting, based on what kind of thought, it is affecting my mood, my motivation, my focus, my mental health, and all those things. So once we realize that not all thoughts are constructive, it's good to know what is overthinking and what is not. And typically, overthinking takes the forms I just mentioned. Now, if you find yourself in these kind of thought patterns, it is useful to number one, of course, you be aware, and then try to put boundaries on them. The way you can put boundaries on them is, number one, give yourself time limits. Like, okay, this kind of random thinking, okay, I will allot a time for it. Now I'll just do it from, yeah, I just do it from 2 and 2:30 every afternoon after I have had my lunch. I will just let myself and let my brain worry or or do whatever it can to or think whatever it wants to think about for half an hour. But then I'll stop and I'll go back to work. I'm not going to let myself do this. I'm not going to fall into the trap of thinking that this is going to lead to somewhere. Uh, so put boundaries, and then try to, when you are thinking, try to see if what in this kind of thought is actually actionable, like whether you can take something from these thoughts that's actually something that is within your control, that you can actually follow through to a solution. The thinking you can follow through to a particular decision or a solution or an action, right? And then another thing that is very useful uh, is to, especially if you do a lot of random, vague thinking, is to give your brain actual analytical problems to solve. In this program, you will hear me talk about uh, the characteristics of our subconscious mind a lot. One thing we don't mention often enough is that our brains and our subconscious mind typically once work. The way our guru often used to explain is that still explains is with the story of Aladdin and the genie. And not many of us know that in the original Aladdin story, in the original Arabian Nights, uh, collection of stories where Aladdin comes from, the genie gives Aladdin this condition that you always have to give me work. And if you can't give me work, I will come and break your neck. You're gone, basically. Like if I finish some work and if you can't always keep me busy, I will come and break your neck. And in some ways, our brains, especially, when our brains are not trained enough, our brains are continuously, they're churning thoughts. Our subconscious mind continuously wants to think about something. And if you don't give it specific constructive work, problems that it can solve constructively, it will create problems for for you to solve. Okay, so it's good to continuously give yourself constructive work, whether that is learning something, whether that is something you're working on, whether that is something that you're actually, your physical work, so that it's occupied, and like that genie, it doesn't start breaking your neck by creating problems that are not there. Okay, so there are many people these days who know all this, who are like, I know overthinking is a problem, like, tell me about it. I know that if I just could stop my overthinking, 90% of my problems will be solved, but I just can't do it. I try. I know all this. I've tried to put boundaries, but even when I'm working, those invasive thoughts, those intrusive thoughts just won't stop. So for there are for if you're in that kind of situation, or someone who is in that kind of situation, there are tools for that too, and one thing that is quite insightful, I think, is realizing that overthinking is often under feeling. People who are uncomfortable, people overthink to the extent that they're uncomfortable with facing their feelings. If you go back to the examples of overthinking I just gave a few minutes ago, you will realize that a lot of those from fear, right? It stems from fear of uh, fear of failure. It stems from fear of people, stem from fear of uncertainty. So So what you're doing is that you are not being able to tolerate the fear of uncertainty, the fear of what other people might think, the fear of failure, and you're covering that up with a lot of thought. In this case, what is much more useful is to actually just face the fear. Actually, just sit and think like, okay, I'm my boss has called me to his office. I have no clue what he has called me for, but I'm afraid it might be really something bad. You know, just admit to yourself, and then once you start training your mind and your brain, you can just sit with that discomfort, and then you realize, okay, once I face this discomfort, I can move on. I can do things in spite of this discomfort, and I can wait till tomorrow. Or if I something's happened and I think the boss is upset, but he or she's not saying anything, I can actually politely ask him or herself or myself, like, what is this? Did I do something wrong? And then maybe it will be clarified. And oftentimes you'd feel like what his or her frown or something may have had nothing to do with you. It's like all those stories you're telling yourself were very, very far from the truth. So the trick here to face the feeling, and some of these fears uh, are very much a part of just being human, because we want to stay safe. So our subconscious generates certain kind of fears in certain situations, but they can be very, very easily managed when you get to the root of the problem, that is those fears. Then some of these fears are exaggerated because the experiences you have gone through since childhood, and the meanings you have given, your subconscious mind, your brain have given to those experiences. This could be trauma, this could be something else, but because of those, you have particular triggers. You may have particular triggers that spur this overthinking in you, and some people might be more anxious about social things. Some people might be more anxious about, like I was more anxious about failure and success and that type of thing. Um, some people might be more anxious about, I don't know, money running out. Like that's their so that those kind of situations trigger a lot of overthinking in them, where purchase decisions or thinking like that. So it is very, 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 very useful to be aware of what is triggering, become aware of the underlying emotions that are triggering all this thinking, and deal with those emotions directly. If you become aware, you will see yourself being the rational human being you are, that no, this really, I cannot really solve this by just thinking and thinking and thinking. I just have to wait this out or act on it, or just face this. And then of course you have meditations and other tools in case of specific triggers, to uh, to sort of train yourself to react differently to those triggers, and I will elaborate on that in another episode. One thing that psychologists say is that people who sort of have an anxious temperament, which is what they term as anxious temperament, tend to have very low tolerance for uncertainty, and they need more control over their lives, which is true. However, given my life's journey, I know that you can change your temperament. You can go from being a very anxiety prone, impending doom type, feeling like there's impending doom all the time, to somebody who is quite resilient, who can take things as it comes. And one of the sort of the inner shifts that makes a big change in this way is just realizing you will never be able to control everything and surrendering to the universe. I mean, I mean, those who know me, it's like one of the things I love the most, about human life. And the more you develop this alignment with the universe, the more you change your mindset to thinking like whatever is happening is the best for me, the more your life will become beautiful. And even whatever happens is actually neutral, right? And what meaning it has on your life depends on what meaning you're giving it, right? If you think like, oh, this thing I wanted this thing, but this thing did not happen. How, and then if you're somebody who think like what happens from for my best, you are working from that mindset, then what you do is like you immediately start looking for the opportunities in that thing, right? And then you find the opportunity. So then you use that failure or rejection to go for something bigger and better in your life. And you probably succeed at it. If you fail again, you again think the same way. And then you actually turn that situation into something that is good for you. But you are doing that, right? But that the fact that you're doing that is coming from this belief that, oh, the universe is always acting in my favor. So if something happened, despite me trying my best, then okay, maybe there is some good in it for me. So where is the good, right? Like this Indian saint put it so beautifully. Like they said, don't treat life as a problem to be solved. Treat life like a mystery to be solved. And that is just so much empowering, and that will what will lead you to the truth. And and everybody who has gone down that path and persisted enough have found something beautiful in the core of life, in the essence of life, and you can do it too. Okay, let's move on. So um, after dealing with your negative emotions, what you will see a lot in today's world in as a solution to overthinking or anxiety is coming to the present, right? When by definition, whenever you're overthinking, you're either analyzing the past or worrying about the future, you are not in the present, you are in your head. And what a lot of people will teach you, and these are good things, is like lots of grounding exercises that will bring your mind to the here and now. And in the past, we've talked about things like that. For example, like the very common one, popular one is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, where you think of 5 things that you can see right now, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing that you can taste right now. So and through the senses, you come back to the present. And there are many other exercises like that, commonly referred to as grounding exercises, that will help you ground yourself to the present. Now, all those are amazing. What is absolutely amazing, more amazing, I would say, is developing this habit of meditating twice every day. Why is that? Let me explain that with a story from the Upanishads, okay? So remember the Upanishads, they were like, this is like 2 millennia ago. Like this story I will tell you is that Upanishad was it was created in between 300 BC and 100 BC, right? So before Christ, so a long, long time ago. But this lesson is so timeless. So it's about a banyan tree, which is like a big tree that is found in the Indian subcontinent. It's common in Bangladesh, which spreads a lot, and in that banyan tree, two birds lived, and one of the birds was very restless, like most of us in this time. It was, it was always sort of looking for fruits. It was always chasing, and when it found a sweet fruit, it was very happy. But then afterwards, after eating it, it needed something else to chase. So it went and chased, found another fruit, and maybe this time the fruit was kind of bitter. And then it would squawk like birds do, oh, God, and then, maybe be dejected for a while and then start chasing something else again, right? Um, but then in the same tree, there was another bird who sat on the branch and observed. It seemed like it didn't get so caught up in chasing the fruits like the other bird. Now, as you know, that it was pretty common, um, in those parts of the world, not just in those parts of the world, in many parts of the world, throughout ages, people have observed the suffering in our this worldly life, and then they have sort of become dissatisfied, and then they have gone off and sort of immersed themselves within themselves to understand why this suffering is happening and how to solve it, right? So in this story, there is this man called Arjun who has come to that stage in his life where all this worldly chasing, and then sometimes winning, but then that thrill of winning sort of dissipating over time, sometimes losing, being in the cycle of winning and losing, getting what you want or not getting what you want, but still ultimately leading to a sort of emptiness. He had gotten tired of that cycle, and then he went off to the forest. And when he came to this particular banyan tree, he noticed those two birds. And he could see the bird that was fluttering around, that seemed restless, and he could immediately relate to that bird. But he also noticed the other one that just seemed observing, and then he was kind of intrigued by that bird. So he had left his worldly life for that time being, and he sat down on at the bottom of the banyan tree to meditate. And as he's meditating, he's having realizations. He understood even better that the way he lived his life up till then was like the first bird, and then he's seeing the detachment in the other bird. But as he continued meditating, he ultimately came to this most empowering realization that these two birds are not really separate. They're just two parts of the same being. The restless bird is like our outer selves, our minds, our egos, but within us, we also have this part that is always just simply present, is just simply experiencing without making any judgment about it. And you don't need to be someone who lives your worldly life to that. You are lucky, you are living in a time where these practices have become more and more accessible to all sorts of people. And if you pick this up, and there are meditations that are made easy so that it's not as hard to get to the stages, I promise you, if you pick this up and you persist, you will experience that part of yourself. You will experience, because just like when you cut your skin, there's blood inside. That part is inside you, you know. And a little while ago, I said the brain is always cranking up thoughts. Yes, that is when you're in normal state. But when you are meditating, you will get to states where your brain will just become still. It really will. And then you will just experience. And with that experiencing is that sense of awe. Because we live in magic. Everything is magic, right? This cup, this thing, everything is magical. But because we have evolved to take things for granted, we we adapt to it. But that part of yourself that just observes, that is simply present, never seem to get tired of anything. It's like everything you're experiencing it for the first time. You're like a child, you know. So that part really is there, and it is possible for ordinary people leading ordinary lives like you and me to get to that part. And once you start aligning that part again and again, even if you move back to a more restless state, you know it's always there. You know we can go back to it. You feel empowered in a way that makes you not ever feel vulnerable in the way you felt before, you know, um, because you realize that there is something in you that is beyond all these ups and downs of this physical existence. And for that is why I invite you to meditate. If you're somebody who has been attending these programs, but you're still not meditating regularly, please just pick up some kind of meditation. It doesn't even have to be quantum, though it's great. And we're working on many different types of meditation. So hopefully I'll be able to give them to you soon. But just pick up something. And if you like 30 minutes is too much for you, start with 10 minutes. But just try to do it. Start with once a day. If you can do twice a day, I guarantee it will prove a much more efficient way of spending your time, because the time you're giving to that meditation will save you a lot of time during the rest of the day. And you have to persist. Sometimes you will have like amazing experiences, then you will not, but um, but it will still, like, it will prove worth it if you persist. Okay, so that's the kind of, that's the end of our speech for today. And again, we started late today. So even though I made my speech shorter, we had to sort of, it's still gone over the time. I'll keep working on this, but let's start our meditation on and then with the meditation we will end our program. And let me just say, because just in case you want to leave before the meditation, is next week we will talk about deficiencies. We're thinking about talking about overthinking today, and a lot of this anxiety, tendency to overthink, happens when you're deficient in certain neurochemicals, which again happen because you're deficient in certain vitamins and minerals. So I want to talk about some of the most common deficiencies that a lot of us have, and which are very easy solutions just by like making yourself sufficient in those vitamins and minerals. You can actually like solve a lot of problems that you think are mental, emotional problems or physical problems. So it's an easy solution. Those deficiencies have easy solutions. You can just pop a pill or integrate something in your diet. So if you're looking for easy solutions to your problem, come back next week and we'll talk about that. Okay. Again, let me start the meditation. Just give me a second.